Welcome to the State of Black Texas, the final edition of a three-part virtual event series called the State of Black Texas. Brought to you by the Defender Network, Houston's leading Black information source. Our first segment tonight is going to feature one of the single most powerful persons or lawmakers in the state, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. And our second segment will spotlight the two most prominent Black state elected officials, Texas Senator Royce West from Dallas and Houston's own Senator Boris Miles. Tonight's program is made possible by corporate leaders who care about the Black community and have invested in the state of Black. They are our title sponsor, HEB, our presenting sponsor, Chevron, our VIP sponsors, Amegy Bank and Cadence Bank. And we'd like to definitely thank them. At this time, I'd like for you to hear a message from our title sponsor, HEB.
Hi, I'm James Harris, Director of Diversity and Inclusion and Supplier Diversity at HEB. HEB has a long-standing history of supporting organizations which focus on social, economic, educational, and voter reformation, which is why we support organizations such as the Houston Area Urban League, the NAACP, and UNCF. We want to especially thank the Houston Defender for bringing this great topic to focus, which is the state of Black. Thank you for allowing us to be a sponsor, and we hope that you enjoy the series. Thank you.
I want to thank James Harris and the HEB family for their support of the community, from the food banks to the investment they've made in minority and Black businesses who serve as their vendors. And I want to thank Chevron and Amegy Bank and Cadence Bank for their support of this program throughout the series. With the addition of the State of Black, we have added a new partner, Houston Public Media, who will showcase segments of the program on Thursday, February 11th, and share it on their public radio station network throughout the state. So check your local programming for the details. And the icing on the cake tonight is our community partners, who will be posing the questions for us, in addition to our reporter from the Houston Public Media. They are the NAACP Houston, the Top Ladies of Distinction, the Greater Houston Black Chamber, the Houston Area Urban League, the Panhellenic Council of Houston, and the Houston Baptist Ministers Alliance. We are so proud and so grateful for them taking our time, their time, to ask these questions. And while we're expressing all these gratitudes and thank yous, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. So with that, now let's get into the real show and introduce our guest. It is a known fact that Dan Patrick, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, was elected in 2014 and then re-elected in 2018, and is a strong voice for conservative policies in Texas and the nation. But there's some facts that you may not know about him. He's tackled problems of failing schools and increasing teacher pay statewide, and is committed to reducing taxes and limiting government spending, border security, and the Second Amendment. He's been married for 45 years, and years ago, before he became an elected official, we used to do a TV show together where we debated the issues back and forth. And let me tell you, sometimes we really got into some serious battles. But out of those battles developed a strong friendship. And because of that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce and welcome to the stage Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Governor, thank you for making this historic move to talk about issues that matter to Black Texans. And I hope you'll make this a tradition. Would you like to make an opening statement?
Well, Sonny, just to say hello and thank you for having me on. It's an honor to speak to the Black community, but to everyone watching. And, that was 21 years ago that we did that TV show.
Wow.
And for a little bit of history, Joel Osteen owned that TV station at the time. He doesn't any longer. And he had hired me to run that station. And so I put on this news program, and I invited you and to be one of our regular guests, and we did kind of a round table like you see on the major networks. And you and I had a lot of fun, and it was just a lot of fun. And
it was.
Those were good days. And then we've done things on radio and Newsmakers and other TV stations. But you and Jody and I go back a long way, so I really appreciate you inviting me on.
Well, I'm going to jump into these questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Governor, the first set of questions, of course, is on a topic we all know is very important in the Black community, and for that matter, the nation, the pandemic. We combined a couple of our partner questions, which focused on the vaccine distribution from NAACP President-elect James Dixon, and also from the National President of the Top Ladies of Distinction, Sharon Beard. With that, roll the question.
Thank you so much for this conversation. My first question is, how do you explain the racial disparities in COVID cases, particularly among African Americans and Hispanics, sicknesses and deaths that are caused by this virus? And what's being done to get the vaccine to those who are disproportionately infected and impacted by this virus?
Thank you, Mr. Governor. In the race to vaccinate the nation and identifying sites to reach widespread immunity, what actions will the Texas legislature play, and what must be a coordinated effort to deal with the fair and equitable distribution of the vaccine?
Dan, COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on the Black and Brown community. Pastor Dixon and Lady Beard are asking the question of what is the state going to do to make sure that there's fair and equitable distribution of the vaccine? Tell me the state's plan.
Thank you, Sonny. Thank you, James. Thank you, Sharon, Lady Beard. Happy to answer that question for you. Sonny, one of the things that I'm working really hard to do, not just for the Black community, but for all communities, is to get out accurate information. Because right now there's anxiety, there's confusion, there's frustration about how do I get a vaccine by the people who want it. Shockingly, Sonny and James and Sharon, shockingly, only about 60% of Texans say they want to take the vaccine. One of the messages we have to get out is to be sure everyone, particularly in the Black community, but everyone, to get the vaccine. The way that we're going to address this over time is for as many people to be vaccinated as possible, particularly those over 65.
But now, Dan,
yes.
the question is where and how are you going to make sure that Blacks and Browns have access to the vaccine? Because they're being impacted the most.
Well, and that's why I'm glad we're doing this, so we can get out some information. It's important. And it's nobody's fault. It's not the Fed's fault. It's not the states. It's not the counties or the cities. It's not the Democrats or the Republicans. But we have this miracle of this vaccine. And Sonny, today we are getting, and I'm going to get specific to the question, but you need to see the bigger picture.
Okay, don't make it too long.
I won't,
okay.
But we get about, but this is so important. We get about 330,000 vaccines a week. So that's about 1.2 million a month. We have over 4.5 million seniors 65 and over. We have 1.8 million healthcare workers. And then we have millions of people who have chronic issues under the age of 65. So obviously, we can't vaccinate 8 million people at one time when we're getting 1 million vaccinations a month. So I don't think that has really been clear to the public. And so I sent a letter to the committee that oversees vaccinations in Texas and said that we need to end some of the confusion, the frustration, so people in the Black community, white, brown community, everyone can have a reliable way of knowing when they're going to get a chance to have a vaccination. We've vaccinated about 2 million people so far, including most people in nursing homes. So in the Black community, Sonny, which is about 14% of the population of Texas, 16.5%, and these are the most recent numbers, roughly 16.5% of all of our positive cases are Black Texans. So a little higher.
That even stresses why they should be distributed within the community.
But Sonny, the number is a little bit better and then a little worse. Let me say this. So about 9.5% of all deaths are in the Black community. Again, the population is about 14%. However, 72.5% of all deaths in Texas, Sonny, are people 65 and over, most with comorbidities. So in that area, in the Black community, you have because not the 14% of all Texans who are Black are not all over 65. So there is a higher percentage of Blacks over 65 who are either testing positive or dying from COVID. And so we distribute the vaccinations. As I said, we have about 330,000 a week. So we distribute them by population around the state. And then when we send them to a county or we send them to a city, it is up to them to decide, for the most part, where those vaccinations go, whether it's the mayor or county judge. And it's also up to the state to create hubs. And so we've we've all learned a lot, and we've only had the vaccines for about a month. We've learned a lot. We started out small, Sonny, to small providers. That didn't work. Then I know in Houston they went to Minute Maid. That didn't work. And so everyone's doing their best. Mayor Turner, the county judge, the governor, the former president, the current president. We're trying to get as many people vaccinated as we can, and in the minority community.
So basically, we're feeling our way through the dark, trying to figure out what's the best way.
What we are, and Sonny, here's what's important for the Black community to know, like every other community. Once again, we have right today who are in 1A. 1A is healthcare workers. 1B are people over 65 or people with chronic illnesses. And we have the breakdown,
Dan, because I don't want to spend too much time if there's not a real answer to the question. It sounds like you're trying to figure it out as you go. It's almost a trial and error. You figure out what works, you figure out what doesn't work, and you keep on pushing. Is that
it? Yes, but let me be a little bit more specific, and then we'll wrap it up because I know you have more questions. So we have only so many vaccines, and it's not that, and all the states are getting roughly the same. We've already vaccinated 2 million people in Texas, more than any other state because we're a large state. But roughly, some states get more, some people get less, and we're working through that with the federal government. But we send them out to the cities, and so now what I have said to EVAC, our committee, to determine this, is we need to prioritize this. Right now, for example, we have 1.5 million people over the age of 75 in Texas. And again, about a third of them may have already gotten the vaccination, particularly in our nursing homes. I want to emphasize them. I want to emphasize school teachers who are 65 plus and school staff, because we're trying to get them in the classroom, and there's about 60,000 of those. So we ought to be able to take care of those. And then I'd like to set up a system in the Black community and every community where maybe it's even odd years of when you were born, maybe it's by birth dates. We need to figure out a way so that when a Black citizen says, I want a vaccination, I have a sense of when that's going to be.
There's a methodology in place, but I'm hearing you say that doesn't exist right now.
Well, we're building it. We're building it out.
Okay.
And actually, I sent this letter this week because I was frustrated that we didn't have one at any level. And so everyone's doing their best, but we'll get better.
I got you. So let's shift to the pandemic's impact on the Black community.
Yes, ma'am.
Our Black businesses are being heavily impacted by COVID. Here's a question from the interim president of the Greater Houston Black Chamber, Carol Guest.
What are the short and long-term strategies you have to grow and sustain Black businesses in the wake of the pandemic?
The next question, in looking at the impact that Carol mentioned, almost 40% of Black businesses nationwide have actually been impacted by or closed their doors permanently. What's the plan, Dan? Does the state have a plan?
Yeah, we do have a plan. We put a work team together. I put an advisory committee together and of Texans from every community to say, how can we help small business? And one of the reasons the Black community has been impacted, and so have businesses, as you know, in all the communities. But today is about Black Texas, as you said, so I'll try to focus on that. But these are not exclusive to any one group. But many of the businesses in Texas that are small businesses are owned by Black individuals. And those businesses are being hit hard, no matter if they're a small restaurant or they could be a cleaners, they could be a small accounting firm.
So what's the plan now?
So here's the plan, which we have been on, Sonny. We have done a better job in Texas, and we haven't gotten everything right, but we've done a better job in Texas than any other state in helping businesses stay open. Number one, we have not locked down. I don't believe in lockdowns. And I know for a period of weeks, some people, whether it's city or counties, but we have not had a lockdown of the state. And now the cities and counties, I think, are opening up. And all the data now from the CDC shows that lockdowns that we've seen in New York and California, they've not helped. So in Texas, for example, Sonny, last month, we've added 65,000 jobs. The way we help Black businesses is we need to get people back to work. You know, I feel sorry for a lot of
but we also have to keep them safe too.
Well, we do, but there's a balancing act there. There's a balancing act there, Sonny, because what you just said, if we try to make sure that no one gets COVID and no one dies from it, and of course that's impossible, then even those states that have tried to do that have closed all businesses, that has not worked. So in Texas, So in Texas, we have done everything we can to keep as many businesses open. And to businesses today, it's not the state or your city or counties anymore asking you to shut down. It's getting customers out, Sonny. So that's why we have to test people. That's why we have to get the vaccinations out. And we've got to get customers to these places. The businesses that I feel sorry for them all. I'm a small business person. And I didn't know if I'd make it through last year at my radio station because I didn't know if people would keep advertising. I mean, everyone's struggling. But our office buildings, we got to get people to go back to work,
So
Sonny.
your answer
we got to get people to go back to work.
So I'm hearing your answer to what the solution is for Black businesses is for them to stay open. Is that the solution?
And as safely as you can. But Sonny, our office buildings around the state and around the country, but they're ghost towns. I mean, they're 10, 15%.
Yeah, they are. No.
And so
I agree with you.
So we can't help those Black businesses in our inner city until we get people going back to work. And so a lot of people are working from home. It's working, but we have to get people back to work in a safe way. Social distancing, wear a mask, get vaccinated when you can. Also, Sonny, this is something we're going to do as the state. Because of the unemployment insurance, we had so many people unemployed. And again, we've bounced back quite a bit. We've cut our unemployment about half from where it was this time a year ago. We're not back to where we were pre-COVID, but Sonny, we paid out so much in unemployment insurance that we're about $6 billion short in our unemployment insurance pool. In other words, the state has paid out $6 billion more.
Well, everybody government-wise is hurting. The state, the county, the city.
Everybody. But let me make this point, Sonny. Let me just make this point. So who pays for unemployment insurance? Businesses pay for it. It comes, I'm a small business guy. Every Black business owner out there, whether they're open or closed, when they reopen, their unemployment insurance is going to increase to cover that $6 billion, except I'm determined to be sure that we cover that $6 billion because that would be a tax increase on small business. That's the last thing we can do. So I believe with the federal help and how we're going to allocate our money, that we're going to be able to repay that into the pool without increasing unemployment insurance for Black businesses, brown businesses, white businesses. That's an important step.
So you're going to offset that and keep it from hitting the small business person.
I'm going to do everything I can, and I think we'll be successful. We need some help from the feds on it, and I think we'll get some help on it.
Well, you get a plus on that one, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
The next question is also focused on healthcare, but it has to do with Medicare from our Dallas partner, Friendship West Baptist pastor Frederick Haynes. And by the way, he just got a school named after him in Dallas. Congratulations,
Pastor.
Mr. Governor, you have decided that it was necessary for Texas to be one of the few states that does not accept Medicaid expansion. My question is, number one, why won't you accept Medicaid expansion? There are people in my church, in my community, who don't have access to health care and have to make decisions that they should not have to make because they don't have access to health care and because we will not accept Medicaid expansion. So my question is, why won't you accept it? My question is, what will you do to replace it so that hurting people can have access to health care?
COVID-19 exposed the health disparities that existed in the Black and brown communities. Access to health care is what Medicare is all about, Dan. And so the question becomes, considering the high number of uninsured people in the state of Texas, what's the legislature planning to do related to Medicare?
Well, of course, we have two systems. We have Medicare, which are for seniors, and we have Medicaid, which was originally designed for poor people, pregnant women, and children. And so we have expanded our health care. Today, Sonny, I believe this number is correct. Our total expenditure on healthcare is $65 billion. That's about 40-some billion from the feds and about 25 billion from the state, roughly. And it increases every year because our population grows. We have healthcare issues. We have health insurance issues. And so this is an issue that we've continued to put money into. We just received a waiver, an extension of 10 years on our 1115 waiver. And with that, the state of Texas will get about $10 billion a year for the next 10 years to design a system so that the state can take over more of our health care. Because I believe the answer is not in any massive federal government program. We have to have Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid, of course, but each state has to design their own plan. For example,
but you want to leave that money with other states then, basically, and you want to design a new plan.
Yeah. So I don't know anything about North Carolina's healthcare situation. So why should I design something for North Carolina or California or New York?
Well, not designing, I mean leaving that money. I'm just thinking of I'm looking at all of the money that we're leaving on the table.
No, we're not leaving money, Sonny, on the table. And here's when you hear Medicaid expansion, we have to be responsible about this. A number of states did not expand Medicaid, but we did expansion on our own through the 1015 waiver to try to create our own system. But the reason we didn't expand, and many of the states who did expand are now going broke, is because originally back in 2009, when that became an issue, in 2009, we were going to get about a 90-10 break. So if we put up $1 billion, we got $9 billion match. But by the year 20, so that was 2009, and I'm using rough numbers, that might not be exactly precise, but it was about a 90-10 match. By the year 2025, it was estimated that the cost to our state would have been almost $25 billion because the federal government is not going to give you that match every year forever. So then it went from like 8 to 2 and 7 to 3 and 6 to 4. And it would bankrupt the state, or it would cause us to raise taxes on everyone to pay for it. So we're trying to deliver through managed health care and through using federal dollars, matching with local dollars. We're trying to do everything we can to maximize our health care.
Right, Dan, would you say you're opting out to do your own plan?
We're trying to design our own plan.
Okay, gotcha.
That's what we're trying to do.
Let me move to this next question, which is a topic that matters to a lot of Black Texans, and that's education.
Yes,
we
ma'am.
combined a couple of questions in this particular case, and the questions are the Houston Area Urban League CEO Judson Robinson and Houston Public Media reporter Sasha Horner.
The pandemic exposed and even deepened inequities in education. How concerned are you about the enormous numbers of children who are failing remote learning, and what kind of safety net is being developed to help these kids recover from learning losses after the pandemic?
Recently, the Urban League partnered with Arvo Realty to buy computer equipment for minority students to address the digital divide. Considering the digital divide among low-income families and the large number of students failing while trying to use the internet, my question is, what will you do to ensure their educational success while facing a budget shortfall estimated to be between $10 and $20 billion? Will the education budget be on the chopping block? And will our kids be further penalized?
Dan, Black and brown children are failing during this pandemic due to the lack of internet access in some cases. In some cases, it's just the challenge of learning remotely.
Yes.
What does the state plan to do to address this? Because it's not just a state issue, it's a national issue.
Sure. Sonny, let me take 30 seconds. I just want to close one thing on the healthcare issue. And I know you have Boris Miles and Royce West on, and we work so well together in the Texas Senate. I've known Royce now the whole time I've been there, and Boris has been with us several sessions. But just in healthcare, when I talk about designing a system, we know in Texas that Black women are twice as likely to die in childbirth from cardiac or hemorrhaging than white women. So since I become Lieutenant Governor, along with Boris Miles, Senator Colcourt, Senator Nelson, we have passed Senate Bill 17, 436, 715, Boris Miles 1599 to try and focus on that issue. So that's what I mean by, I think the state, if we can identify an issue for Black Texans, any Texans, we can zero in on those things. And our members have worked together across the aisle to do that. Now on education, I was chair of education in 2013. It is my passion. My wife was a longtime school teacher, as you know, and there's not a more noble profession. And right now, that noble profession is hard hit. Our students are hard hit. Our parents are hard hit. And so no one ever planned, Sonny, no one ever planned for full-time virtual education. We have a virtual school network that I helped along the way when I was education chair and as lieutenant governor, but it was not built out to handle 6 million students. We have total about 6 million kids in school, Sonny, and about 5.4 million in public schools. So the same as we're ramping up as we did a year ago on testing and now on vaccinations, we're ramping up to help inner city kids, the Black community, as well as rural, which has some connectivity issues. We paid for, with federal help and CARES Act funding, we provided a
So
million
what are we going to do, though,
laptops,
Dan?
hotspots.
What are we going to do, though? Are there any
In
plans
terms
or
of-
bills on the floor, or that are going to be proposed as it relates to addressing the challenge of these failing students in this internet digital divide?
Well, Sonny, we need to get our kids back in the classroom. And that's one of the reasons I want to get vaccinated. Our teachers who are most vulnerable, over 65, vaccinated. All parents want their kids back in the classroom. And we know, and we want teachers to be in a safe environment. We have about half of our 5.4 million kids today, Sonny, back in the class. About half are not. We're losing kids, Sonny. You're absolutely right. We're losing them in the Black community. They've disappeared.
Are they going to provide some additional funding in education to try to close this gap, or have kids go to school during the summer or something? What's the plan?
Great question. So in 2019, as Lieutenant Governor, along with the Speaker and the Governor, we passed the biggest increase to education funding in the history of the state, $11 billion. I particularly pushed a $2 billion raises for our teachers, because we need to get the best and brightest coming out of college to be teachers. It should be a profession, not a job. Secondly, Sonny, we provided roughly $1 billion to $1.5 billion to add 4 weeks of school in the month of July for children in the Black community or the brown or the white community who are behind. And that idea wasn't mine. I asked the superintendents, what do you need? And they said, we need full day pre-K. We funded that in 2019, Sonny, and we're going to fund it again. And they said, we need summer school, 4 weeks of summer school for the kids who are behind. We funded that.
Are we looking at doing something similar to that then, Dan?
Well, no, that's an ongoing program, Sonny. In other words, when I did that, I remember superintendents, and I have a group of about 30 I meet with to get advice. And they said, Dan, are you going to be able to maintain this? And I said at the time, unless something extreme happens. Well, the extreme has happened, but we are committed. And in our budget that we just introduced last week, even though it's going to be a challenge, we're fully funding those programs we created. The teacher pay is going to stay, the summer school is going to stay, and all of the other money we put in. And the addition, we've got to increase, we got to get our hubs from our internet companies, so that everybody has access to internet. We've got to get everyone with a laptop or some computer so that they can connect. And we've done a good job with that. And all the school districts have, but it's not perfect and it's not 100%. But we're better than where we were last year, and we need to improve that virtual school network, because like telemedicine, Sonny, telemedicine was in its infancy. And today, a lot of people are getting telemedicine. So we're focused on all of that.
Okay, let me shift.
Yes, ma'am.
A pressing issue in the Black community we want to hear you talk about centers on social justice and systemic racism. The top ladies of distinction in the Houston Area Urban League both had questions, so we combined their two questions to present to you, Dan.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Governor, for this opportunity. The 2020 protest demanding justice for the murder of George Floyd was a watershed moment for our nation. As we witnessed the actions of the mob and the attack on the Capitol, it was very clear that there are double standards when it comes to accountability for one's action. What will you do to address the systemic racism and the divisiveness that has been cultivated over the past 4 years?
Time and again, we have seen employees of local, state, and federal government displaying racist acts in words, online, or in person, such as the mob attack on the Capitol that included elected officials, law enforcement, and others sworn to uphold the public trust. What actions and/or policies have you implemented since the murder of George Floyd to root out these type employees paid by us, the taxpayers?
Governor, the injustices in Texas and America have caused a lot of people just take to the street to protest. But what will the legislature do to address some of these concerns, particularly like realigning, restricting immunity, or police reform, or some of the things like the George Floyd Act that's also on the floor? Where do you stand on these issues?
Yeah. Thank you, Sonny, and thank you, Judson and Sharon. And for your audience, they may not know, I can't actually hear the video questions. I get them from you, so I want to be sure I have the names matched up to the questions and answer them as closely to how they ask it. Sonny, many people, you know this, I think, but many people may not know. I didn't grow up in Texas. I've been here 41 years. I came here in 1979 as a sportscaster on Channel 11 in the Love You Blue era. And some people out there watching will still remember the guy with the big blue hat. But I grew up in inner city Baltimore, not far from the Inner Harbor, and in the 1950s. I'll be 71 in 2 months. So I've been around a while. And so I grew up in the inner city through the 50s and 60s when we had segregated cities and the Martin Luther King movement, those tough 1960s. So I don't remember a lot from the 50s, but I remember a lot of it.
Let's bring it to now.
But Sonny, all of us can't bring it to now unless we have a shared experience from the past.
Okay.
And so my shared experience is I remember an America that we shouldn't have had, of segregation. So in terms of social justice today, I believe in my heart we've come so far from those days, but I also believe in my heart we have a long way to go, and it never ends. And in terms of systemic racism, Sonny, I don't. So I'm talking from my heart, Sonny. I'm talking from my heart. Wait a minute. I'm talking from my heart. I don't believe that the majority of Black, white, and brown Americans are racist. Do we have pockets of racism in this country from all sides? Yes. But the way we lead in Texas to address this issue is by example. And that's us working together. Yes.
But it's proven, Dan, that example does not work. There are still people, and like you said, there are few people who are in the mix of the group that are the ones that are breaking the laws. I agree with you there. But the question is, if you have immunity and you are not held responsible for taking those lives, what other recourse except policy to change that immunity to actually affect change?
Well, Sonny, I talked with Royce West this week, and when we had the terrible shooting in Dallas, where he represents 5 years ago, Royce and I worked on legislation to deal with that issue. And I reached out to him because he was a Democrat.
What is the legislation? I can't wait.
And because he was Black and I was white, I said, Royce, I need you to partner with me. And we passed legislation back then to address that issue. And he and I talked on the podium this week. I've talked with Boris Miles, with Senator Joan Huffman. We will bring our senators together and we will address those issues in legislation. I can't tell you what it looks like today, Sonny, but I can tell you this. No one wants anyone from law enforcement who shouldn't be on the job because of anything that they have done that would indicate something that could happen, like we've seen elsewhere.
And if that's the case, then policies have to change to hold those who aren't a part of the group, who do go against.
Right. And I can tell you this, Sonny, that in talking with HPD and police all over the state, they don't want any bad officers on the force either. Right. They don't want any bad officers on the force. And
but we've got to hold people accountable so that those that are bad officers are held accountable and are prosecuted for the crimes that they commit. I got to move on.
Okay, but Sonny, I think they have been charged in many other cities, and many have been in front of a jury or a judge, often in the inner cities, who are also Black, who have determined their guilt or innocence, and that's how it should be. And so Royce and Boris and myself and Republican senators, we will find a way to get through this. But one of the things, just quick, when you said what bills were those that Royce and I passed?
I got to get to redistricting.
So Royce came to me with an idea. And Royce passed a bill, Senator West, last time, that I supported totally. And that is in our school to teach our kids, Black, white, and brown, how to interact with police. When you get your driver's test, when people go to get to teach.
Yeah, but that's shifting. I understand.
No, that's not shifting anything. It's not,
you're going to the core. I do understand. You're saying raise the generations that are coming up to understand how to interface, which will cause a paradigm shift. And I understand that piece. Right. But people are looking at those that are committing the crimes today. And like you said, there aren't a lot, but every life is valuable.
Well, sure it is.
Who commit those crimes need to be held accountable.
Right. And every law, and you're right, Sonny, and we are, I can't say it any more than I've said it. We're
Okay.
addressing that. But if you ask me
Okay.
today, after 4 weeks in session, we have 4 months to
Yeah,
go,
you still got,
what the
right.
bill's going to look like. We're working on that together. Republicans and Democrats, law enforcement, and the Black community, the brown community, we will come together and find legislation to address this issue.
Well, we will be
we have to
looking for
protect the
that
public
legislation.
and law enforcement at the same time.
Gotcha. And you know, I have family in law enforcement.
I know you
but
do.
they still have to be held accountable.
We all
10
have to be held
years-
accountable.
I hear you. Every 10 years, the legislature, and this is your last question.
Yes, ma'am.
The legislature gets to deal with redistricting. Houston Public Media statewide reporter Sasha Cordner has a question.
The Republican-led Texas legislature will be taking on redistricting this year, meaning lawmakers will be redrawing political maps for national, state, and local districts. How will you alleviate concerns from voting rights groups that worry voters of color, especially Black voters, could be disenfranchised by gerrymandering?
The decision the legislature makes this session will impact the political direction of our state for the next 10 years. Almost every time a plan is drafted by the legislature, it ends up in the courts. How will you approach redistricting when rumors contend Texas is changing from red to purple?
Yeah. Well, I think we're still red for a while, but
Okay.
we'll see. But look, redistricting, we have a committee, a bipartisan committee. Joan Huffman is the chair. Senator Hinojosa from the Valley is the vice chair. It has 17 members, Republicans and Democrats from all over the state. Their task is to draw a map that's legal and fair. And in terms of there's always someone who has a disagreement. When you try to draw 31 districts for every senator, not everyone agrees, but we'll get there. Normally, we would do it, sooner than later, but we're waiting for the data from the federal government.
And the census data is going to be late based on every indication, correct?
Yes, ma'am. So
Yes,
we may be there a while.
Okay.
But we'll draw a legal and fair map, and everyone will have input. And before we close, first of all, thank you for having me. And,
Yeah, I was
and again, I know Royce and Boris are coming on next. Both are leaders in the Senate. They represent the Black community very well. And we have a personal relationship. We trust each other. We work together, and we work through problems. And I'm appreciative of how they work across the aisle with us. Most people, last thing I'll say, Sonny, most people say, well, it's partisanship. Well, maybe in Washington, D.C., but in the Texas Senate, last year we passed 1,818 bills. Only 18 out of the 1818 passed with only Republican votes. So on 99.99.99% of all legislation we passed, joint resolutions, Senate resolutions, bills, local bills, statewide bills.
That's a fact I have to remember.
Yeah, and no one ever says it. They say, well, we work together. There are differences that divide the parties without question. But last time it was 18 bills out of over 1,800 that we had difference of opinion on. So we work together well. We're going to continue to do that for Black Texas, white Texas, brown Texas, and all Texans. Because at the end of the day, we are one Texan. And that's the way it should be.
Dan, I want to thank you for taking the
ma'am.
time to join us and the Houston Defender Network, Houston's leading Black information source, and addressing the concerns of Black Texans. Because we cannot begin to create consensus until we take time to actually talk to each other.
Yep.
And so this has been the beginning of the conversation. I know I've had to cut you off a couple
That's
of
all right.
times.
No, I
because
understand.
I'm
I would
trying to
talk
get a lot
forever.
of
You know me.
questions. Yes, I do know that. So
Yes, you do.
Now we will end this
Thank you,
segment of
Sonny.
the program, right, and take a short break to share with you some Black Texas quick facts and ask you the question, do you know the state Texas Black elected lawmakers? Well, we're going to show you. Stay tuned, and we'll return after this message with the only 2 Black senators in Texas, Royce West and Boris Miles. Stay with us. Welcome back to the State of Black Texas, the final edition of a three-part event series brought to you by the Houston Defender Network, Houston's leading Black information source. The virtual event is sponsored by our title sponsor, HEB, our VIP sponsors, Amegy Bank and Cadence, and our presenting sponsor, Chevron. And we also have added a media sponsor, the Houston Public Media. It gives me great pleasure to introduce two of the most powerful Black men in our state, Texas Senator Royce West of Dallas and Houston's own Texas Senator Boris Miles. Welcome, gentlemen. I hope you were able to listen to the first segment of our program with the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick. Now it's your turn.
Thank you, Sonny, and believe we were listening.
Okay, well, one of the things I want our audience to know is we're going to give these brothers equal time. So the governor was on for 40 minutes. Y'all going to be on for 40 minutes, okay? Because we're not going to cut you short, okay?
Okay.
The first round of questions actually focused on COVID-19 and were posed by NAACP President James Dixon and also by top ladies of distinction, National President Sharon Beard. They wanted to know how the state is going to ensure that vaccines are distributed equitably. Where do you all stand? Is there a plan, or are you recommending something, or what's on the table right now?
Royce, you don't mind if I go first on this one?
You're on the committee, so I'll let you, once you go first.
Let me make it very simple, plain and simple for your listening audience, Sonny. The state made an agreement, put out their own process of how they were going to distribute the vaccines. I'm the highest ranking member of Health and Human Services as a Democrat. And I want to share with your listening audience the principles that they gave that we didn't ask for, but they put in writing and they confirmed through Dr. Hellerstadt, Commissioner of Department of State Health, Dr. McCarthy, the physician of Chief Memorial Hermann Hospital, Imelda Garcia, Associate Commissioner of Labor, Laboratory and Infectious Disease, and our own Dr. Dave Percy from the Houston Medical Health Department. And it simply reads, Sonny, it simply reads, one ethical principle, maximizing benefits to encompass the obligation to protect and promote the public health and social economic well-being of the short-term and long-term. Equal concerns requires that every person be considered to treatment as equitable, dignified way, and understanding the worth of their value in the state of Texas.
So in simple terms, what is this saying, though?
Well, let me get to the last one, okay? Of the three, and there's three more. They want to mitigate health inequities, including obligation to explicitly address the higher burden of COVID-19 experienced by populations most affected heavily, given their exposure to health inequities. These are African-American communities that they're talking about. This is the promises that they made. We didn't ask for. And the procedural principles, fairness, requiring engagement with public, particularly those who are affected by the pandemic, and an impartial decision making about the even-handed application of the vaccine. Transparency includes the obligation to communicate with the
public. But now, Boris, I'm hearing you say equitable. I'm hearing you saying transparency. I'm hearing you say all of these statements. But
let me add evidence-based.
Okay.
So those were the six.
Okay.
So for some particular reason, as we saw what happened in Dallas, which was so blatant last week, and it's blatant here in Houston, Texas as well.
Share a little bit for our audience who may not be familiar with what happened.
Go ahead, Royce.
Really, and let me say this. In Dallas, the County Commissioners Court adopted an order that prioritized providing vaccines to people in some underserved areas, specifically African Americans and Latinos and some Anglos. The Commissioner of Health threatened to pull all vaccines from Dallas County if it wasn't made available to the entirety of North Texas, because there was a plan over in Tarrant County that prioritized similar districts. But let me say this: when you begin to look at, because frankly, I thought it was being unequitable myself, and so I checked into it. Of course, we had to check into it. And the difference between the two plans, one was outreach and one was designating certain people to get it to the exclusion of others, okay? And so we changed it, and we have worked with and continue to work with the Department of Health and Human Services, just like Boris, using exactly what Boris said, to focus in on our community. Now, how have we done that? Okay, how have we done that? What we've done, we found out that Walgreens, as an example, Boris, and CVS and some of these stores were getting vaccines. And I thought it was pursuant to a state contract, only to find out this morning it's pursuant to a federal contract, okay? But they're getting vaccines. I made certain that those stores in our communities were getting dosage in order to make certain we get the vaccine out. And so we've got to be vigilant. We've got to make certain that we continue to take the principles that Boris just talked about, stay in contact with the health department, and hold them accountable for getting it out. And we've got to also figure this out. Now, I want y'all to listen to this. We've got to figure out how much CARES money has come down that the Department of Health has discretion on utilizing in order to equalize the issues that negatively or disproportionately impact our community. If they have money, which they do, we need to help them imagine or reimagine how to use that money to benefit our community.
So Royce, how do we find out, or how do we get to know how that CARES money that you said is discretionary, that should be spent on Black and brown communities, because that's where the impact is being had? How do we track that? How do we stay on top of that?
I think it's twofold. Number one, we've got to talk to Sheila Jackson Lee, Al Green, and the other congresspersons who are there. They can get Eddie Bernice, Mark Vesey. They can have ready access to the agencies and are able to make certain that they know exactly how much money has come to Texas and what agencies it goes to the governor's office. But then we've got to figure out, once it get here, what departments it's going to, and then hold those departments accountable for spending it also for the benefit of our communities. Not just give lip service to it, but to spend it where it impacts our communities also.
And Sonny, let me just add two things to that. One, the leadership in Austin has to stop playing ping pong with the vaccines with our local leaders. You know, they're using it as a tool to kind of keep some of our local leaders in check. And look,
how are they doing that? Please explain.
Well, they're telling our local leadership, well, we don't have any vaccines. We can't send you right now. I keep in contact with Stephen Williams from the city's health department. Right. And many times they've complained to me that, Boris, we just don't have it. Well, I go back and check with the state and they tell me they sent, X amount of doses to the city, and we haven't received it. And they're using it as a political ping pong ball. But more importantly on this issue than anything else, we have to hold the state accountable for the principles that they laid down on this distribution. Okay, we have to hold them accountable, as Roy said, on the principles that they.
And is that the state health department, or where?
That was the state health department. That was the physician of Chief Memorial Hermann Hospital, commissioner of laboratory infectious disease, and the COVID vaccine expert for the state of Texas, and chief medical officer for the city of Houston. They made a presentation. And when the presentation was made, Royce, and Health and Human Services, I specifically asked each one of them, okay, these are the principles that y'all are laying down. I look forward to working with you in addition to your framework and your plan to do some grassroots and some alternative type of vaccinating where we go into our communities in the churches and our civic clubs and our community.
Especially those who can't get out.
Those who can't do that. That is correct. That's going to be, and we're going to have, Sonny, we're going to have a grassroots campaign to do this.
We have to, otherwise we're not going to reach the people who are most vulnerable. I'm going to shift a little bit. Okay, I'm going to let you make a quick comment, Royce. Go ahead.
The governor just did a press release yesterday talking about the use of mobile units.
Right.
Okay, to be able
I thought he would have brought it up.
the underserved areas. And so we're going to continue to explore that to make certain that the homebound people in our communities are able to get access to some of these mobile unit operations.
Truly. Let's flip to the Black businesses that are being impacted by COVID. And, you know, nationally, the statistics say 40% of Black businesses are being shut down permanently. What do you see the state doing to help those Black businesses that are still in existence survive and sustain themselves?
You know, as I see it, those numbers are correct. The reality is that I heard the governor talk about the issue concerning unemployment taxes. Yes, that's a good one. The other thing is that there is an issue that's come up concerning PPE. All of us know what that is. Some of the businesses, not a lot of the Black businesses, but some businesses ended up getting PPE. And the IRS initially wanted to make that taxable. So if you got $10,000, they wanted you to include that on your business tax and end up paying taxes on that. Well, the senators and the House members shut it down in Washington. There is word that Glenn Hager, the comptroller, wants businesses to have to pay franchise taxes on PPE. And so we're going to have to join with Republicans to make certain that we shut that down. Businesses are failing due to no fault of their own other than the pandemic. And so we've got to make certain that whatever we can do in order to stem any unnecessary burdens that we do that. That's number one. Number two, we've got to continue to make certain that just because we're in this pandemic, that I continue to work with the Houston Black Chamber and the other chambers around here to continue to make certain that contracts, the state isn't out of business. And so we got to make certain that that HUD program continues to have and from that standpoint, I'm going to need to make certain that we have advocates coming out of Houston, letting Doris and I know what agencies they want to kind of pinpoint on with certain laser certainty to get contracts.
Well, Royce, we do have a question that refers to that, but I want to hit this first question that has to do with community economics. That's from one of your fellow residents in Dallas, Pastor Freddie Haynes, and he speaks to the issue of what he calls community economics. And with that, I'm going to ask our production team to roll that question.
I serve a community that is inundated with payday and car title loans. And at the same time, it is severely underbanked. Not only underbanked, but this is a business desert, a job desert. What kind of policies are you going to propose that will put an end to the proliferation of payday predators, economic predators, and replace them with opportunities for resourcing a community that historically has been targeted through public policy for neglect and to be taken advantage of by these economic predators?
Royce and Boris, this question is basically about the Black community being under siege by the payday and car title predators. And Pastor Haynes is on it when he says this is policy driven. And the fact of the matter is we're underbanked. He mentioned in his question, we have business and job deserts. What is the legislature doing this session to address these issues?
The same thing they've been doing ever since we've been fighting this issue. Nothing.
That's
nothing.
It. We both have the same answer. Nothing.
All of us got nothing.
And I'm going to say, like I've said over and over and over again, the power to change this is right here in our hands. We're not using it. The power to change it is in our hands. And if we vote and change administrations, we'll get those types of issues addressed at the state level. I guarantee that.
And what he said, what Royce is saying, voting has consequences, even when you don't vote. Voting has consequences. So we have to get our people registered that aren't registered and get them to the polls, because that's the only way we're going to change the temperament of this state.
How do you think that those two senators in Georgia got elected?
Voting.
They got elected.
Amen. Voting.
Women down there who all of us know who will be the next governor of the state of Georgia, getting out each and every day, registering people to vote and getting there.
It's true.
And make sure they vote.
Okay, I'm gonna move to the next question, which has to do with contracts, state contracts. And it's from the interim president of the Greater Houston Black Chamber, Carol Guest.
As the number of contracts obtained by black businesses in Texas is infinitesimal compared to the number of contracts let, what are your plans to create and execute a more effective Hub MWBE program outside of the current Hub program that would ensure impactful minority participation in state-led contracts?
You know, Carol asked a great question, and you all kind of touched on it from the stand, especially when you consider all these disparity studies that are being done in the Houston area that have reflected that Harris County, the Port of Houston, we're waiting on Metro, are not doing business with African-American businesses. What can be done on the state level to change the paradigm of Black businesses not getting a fair share of those contract dollars?
You want to start that, Boris?
Yes, no, not a problem. First of all, I want you to know that Royce and I are drafting a piece of legislation to create an independent state hub, a state hub office to act as an ombudsman for minority contracting for hub contractors. Secondly, the most important thing is education. We have to do a better job of educating our hub minority contractors on how to go after these state contracts. And then we have to educate them not only on how to go after them, but how their money flow is going to be dealing with the state. Because so many of our Black contractors have gotten contracts, but it's gone out of business because they don't realize how slow the state pays on these contracts. But most importantly, we've got to do some education to our people, and also look at filing an independent ombudsman for state hubs.
You know, let me add on to what Boris just said. And I want you to listen to me very closely. Everyone who is in business, and I know there's a lot of business persons listening to us this evening and looking at this, it is so important that you support your local chamber and your statewide chamber. Why is that? What I know is this: Black people tend to be the ones that get these programs set up. And we're the last ones to be able to benefit from these programs.
Wow.
When you do a longitudinal analysis at the state level, you'll see that our participation hasn't changed that much. There are a few state agencies that are doing a better job, but what ends up changing is the executive director. And they turn around and sit up and say, we're going to do better, okay? So what I've said over and over again is to support the Black Chamber, make certain that the Black Chamber has an advocate down in Austin, that your chamber decides what agency or agencies it's going to target for increased African-American participation, the Department of Transportation, okay?
That's a big one. That's a big one.
It is a big one.
That's a big one.
And make certain that we have focus with laser certainty. Do that with criminal justice, health and human services, all three big spending agencies. And if you are doing that and making certain that persons in the chambers are going after those contracts, then you have us as the backdrop. You have your legislators at the backdrop that will monitor the situation. But the reality is that we've got to make certain that we focus on 2 or 3 agencies and not trying to be a mile wide and inch deep. Then we can be more effective as your legislators, as your
So there needs to be a business strategy that's focused on those 3 agencies and go at it with some type of strategic plan. I think that's a good outcome just from that conversation. Let me shift a little to more of Joe Q public.
Before you go there, let me just say one more thing, because I have lived in the vineyard of hubs and disadvantaged businesses for years, okay? Black people, we have more Black people in the state of Texas than any other state. More Black people in the state of Texas, all right? We have more Black power now in the state of Texas than we have in a long time. And so at the city level, in Houston, in Dallas, in other areas, we should be making certain that we work and hold accountable those elected leaders, those city managers and others that have MWBE programs, and make certain that African Americans are getting their fair share of the dollars.
Well, I know one particular group, which is headed by Charles O'Neill, is doing a really dynamic job in trying to gather those resources and develop that strategy and harness that power.
We've got to quit trying. This is 2021.
I agree. Well, let's just say yeah, but Royce, it's like, you know how long you've been in the Senate. You got to keep hitting that puppy until finally you got to scratch, and then eventually got to break, and then you hit, because it's taking forever. Let me share.
Sonny, can I just add one thing?
Yeah, okay.
In the past, in a couple of sessions back, I had 2 buses filled with African-American contractors, African-American, and they filled up the TxDOT boardroom for a hearing. You remember that, Royce?
I do.
And I can tell you, that was so effective. It got TxDOT to start talking and issuing a few contracts to people who look like us. So I think we need to take that rifle shot on each one of the agencies is right, but we got to come in strong so they know we mean business.
Gotta be persistent.
And be persistent.
We're going to shift from the business to Joe Q. Public. Evictions and foreclosures are at an all-time high. The question is, what can the state do to protect people who are vulnerable when it comes to the roof over their head?
Well, you want to start, boys? You want me to go with it?
No, go ahead and take that.
Okay. Well, we heard President Biden the other day about wanting to freeze evictions across this country. Okay, I think he did it through an executive order, and it still hadn't trickled down yet. I do know that the Supreme Court had frozen evictions, but they lifted that, and so now you end up having counties that are slowing evictions down, but often restarting some also. So there's not any real coverage, as I know right now, universal coverage for protection from foreclosures and also evictions.
Sonny, I've always tried to operate as an elected official on statistics and data. So I filed SB 417, and I'm sure Royce is going to join on to, and it's requiring the state to comply all the racial data, all the data of foreclosures by race, so that we can have something to back up what we're saying. We know it already, but sometimes we got to put it in their face to make sure they understand what the consequences are. And just so you know, I'm on record in writing to the governor to ask him to use some of his CARES Act fund to help some of our people who are being foreclosed on.
Yeah.
So your answer then is that we are working on it. There is no legislation except for what you put from the standpoint of the statistics to track the numbers and to see what impact has happened.
Well, this is our first session we've had this big epidemic, and people have been thrown out and foreclosed on, like in the numbers that they have been. So yes, we just started.
Okay. So most of the protection needs to come from the county governments, because it happens in JP courts. And so that's the point. You can kind of slow it. Given that we're in this COVID environment, some courts shouldn't be open.
And Royce, in the bill, I have the Justice of Peace is reporting to the Office of Court Administration to keep that data.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we're going to follow SB 417 to keep track of what's happening, okay? With that, the next question comes from Freddie Haynes again, who really had directed this originally to the governor, but because we ran out of time, I wanted to make sure, because this issue to me is one of the pressing issues confronting the Black community. With that, roll the question from Freddie Haynes.
Mr. Governor, what will you do to put an end to the proliferation of landfills and toxic waste sites that target poor communities? Mr. Governor, what will you do to ensure that environmental racism is a thing of the past? And will you take the lead in fighting to ensure that climate change does not continue to hurt our planet, with Black and brown communities being on the front lines of those toxic waste sites and all of those evidences that we don't believe that climate change is destroying our planet? Do you believe in climate change? What will you do to address environmental racism?
Gentlemen, Pastor Haynes' question had to do with the environmental racism that exists in Texas and really in our nation. And he speaks to the toxic waste dumps in Dallas and the cancer clusters that we have of leukemia in the 5th Ward. The question is, and then we have climate change and its impact when we look at Hurricane Harvey, and we're still trying to dig our way out of that here in Houston. What can the legislature do to try to address these issues that we know that are inevitable?
What can the legislature do?
Yes.
I'll tell you what we can do in terms of the agency responsible for the permitting of some of these particular facilities that emit toxins in the air, and in terms of the dumps that habitually end up being in African American and Latino areas. They can deny the permits. They can they can develop the rules and regulations that would put higher standards in place that would have to be met. And if they're not met, then you deny the permits. You can make certain that you open up the adjudication where citizens can come in and have a greater voice as it relates to showing the impact it's going to have on the community and allowing the commission to take that into consideration. They closed those hearings down somewhat in about 5 or 6 sessions ago. That needs to happen. We need to make certain that to the extent that local jurisdictions are responsible for issuing those permits, that we continue to make certain that we hold them accountable and that they make it more difficult in order to get those permits. A lot of times they make it very difficult to get permits to build things in our community. They sure can make certain that they make it more difficult in order to put those facilities that produce the toxins that we're talking about. I am so glad to see the President of the United States, Joe Biden, get back into the Paris Accord also. That would help us on a national basis. I'm glad to see John Kerry be somewhat of the czar now for climate change in this country. And many of the industries are now turning from fossil fuel based to electric vehicles that obviously don't emit as many toxins into our environment.
It is good to see the national agenda change to where it is leading the fight and not negating the fight. So go ahead, Boris. I'm sorry.
Sonny, let me clear up something that Roy said. The commission is TCEQ, and this is a very sensitive issue to me because in the last 6 days, Royce, I've had to sit in on Zooms for 2 permits in my district. Senate District 13 has the most permits for environmental health issues. We have more of these type of facilities than anywhere else in the state of Texas, in Senate District 13. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's very sensitive to me. On the one we had just recently, they want to put a batch plant right across the street from a crushed concreting plant. And they're going to tell my citizens that it doesn't even, it's not, having both of them there is not going to affect our air.
Live.
I call bullshit on that, okay? I call bullshit on that, okay? Just so people understand what that means. So I filed Senate Bill 86 at the request of the city of Houston. And what that does is actually require the city council or county commissioner to also have to sign off and also have to agree on these applications. That's one. Senate Bill 365 will require TCEQ applicants to submit environmental justice reports to require custom plans for facilities located in communities of historical effect by the environmental racism. Look, real simple. It's environmental racism.
Right, it is. And so I'm hearing both of you all say, stop it at the policy level or at the permit level. And that way we keep these, at least bar those that are coming into our community. But what about those who've already committed the damage?
Sonny, we do both. Okay. We stop them at the local level and we get a stronger grip on the state because look, TCEQ is Texas. And it seems to me as if they're working for the vendors, Royce, more so than working for the state of Texas, for the people in Texas.
Again, it's not rocket sciences.
No.
And Freddie, I know you're watching this. It's not rocket science. You know what we need to do. We need to vote.
We need to vote. And Royce, just so you know,
back to that. Okay.
Just so you know, Royce, I'm having Clean Air Houston and the Sierra Club are going to meet. I'm going to meet with them next week. There's a possibility we file a lawsuit for Senate District 13.
Woo,
I mean,
okay.
it's deplorable.
That would be historical, but it would be definitely valued to those people whose kids are being born with leukemia just because of the air they breathe.
And Boris, let me say this to you. Let me say this to you, little brother. Okay, make certain that you use your federal congressional.
Absolutely, EPA. Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And let me say something. We may not be able to go through with the lawsuit. There may be some things that we can't sue. But let me tell you one thing it will do. It's going to bring some attention to the situation.
Well, not only that, if you're using EPA, there's federal money that comes into the state.
Into the state.
All right. And if we can't use our congressional delegation to put some pressure on Texas to do the right thing, then where are we?
Right.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears to education. The Panhellenic Council of Houston was not able to record an actual question, but her question, along with the questions that were posed by the Houston Public Media and also Judson Robinson, centered around what is the educational agenda, knowing that our kids are failing because of lack of internet or a lack of understanding of how to deal with remote learning. How do we play catch up? What is the state going to do to help us and our children from being held back for years because of this pandemic?
You know, go ahead, Boris.
Well, Texas has got to keep our school districts and remain them to be held harmless. They're not responsible for the COVID. They're doing the best job they can in our school districts to deal with the COVID, okay? And we have been told that House Bill 3 won't be reduced in any kind of way, okay? That the same funding we had before COVID, we're gonna have during the COVID period. We need that funding so that we can make up for the lack of the digital divide. We can make up for the lack of kids falling behind this, through this COVID session, this COVID time. But more importantly, the commitment to say, okay, senators, okay, state reps, okay, the state of Texas, we're not going to go backwards on HB 3. I think that's important, and we need to hold them to that, Royce. Okay, we've got to hold that to them, we just got to stand firm. Our students and our kids are the rock and the goals of our community as we go forward, of our futures. And if they're not prepared, if our kids aren't prepared for the real world when they get out here, man, it's going to be tough for us seniors.
It really is, because they're going to be the taxpayers.
It's going to be tough for us old folks at that time.
It's true. Okay, go ahead. I'm going to let you close out this part, and then we've got a couple of more questions we want to hit, okay?
Okay, and I agree wholeheartedly with Boris. Right now in 2019, we probably had about right at 90% of Black students graduate from high school. That's pretty good. And we've had probably about less than 5% that are dropouts. That's pretty good in the state of Texas. And the fact is that we're ahead of a lot of other states as it relates to African Americans, but there's still that education gap. And yes, there's a commitment from Democrats and Republicans on finance and appropriation to keep the money that we had in HB 3 plus give additional monies so that, yes, even to have that tax compression that we had during the last session, to lower some of your school property taxes, that happened. But as it relates to African American students, I want to hear from educators. I need you to call Boris about what you think specifically we need to do as it relates to additional support in order to help close that gap. I know the conditions as it relates to that digital divide. It's still here. And so we're working very hard to make sure every child, and I'll work with the Lieutenant Governor on this, I don't want to keep on kicking the can down the road, have access to broadband and also a device in order to learn.
I want to get these last two questions in real quick. One of them is you can probably hit and get out, but Pastor Dixon wanted you to weigh in on the insurrection. Listen to his question right quick.
On January 6th, the world witnessed the assault on American democracy. And my question is, why hasn't there been more visible and verbal condemnation of these assaults on American democracy as we saw people stampeding the nation's capital? And why hasn't there been more outspoken condemnation of the divisive rhetoric and public demonstrations that we've seen recently?
So, senators, it appears that he wants to know, why have folks in Texas, particularly elected officials, not been more outspoken? I think you have the answer to that question already.
I mean, it kind of depends on what elected officials you're talking about.
Wait a minute, me and Rev talk every night. So why couldn't ask that personally to me?
In fact, I told Boris there was a brother that was a part of that insurrection. I called Boris and said, Boris, I told that brother me be at Capitol Hill, not Capitol Hill.
No, but all joking aside.
We need to make certain we continue to look at exactly how they're going to be treating these people involved in the insurrection. You know that if Black Lives Matter, we'd still be picking bodies up off of that floor.
That's right.
Would be.
That's right.
Okay, I'm gonna shift to redistricting. What's the verdict, guys? Are we gonna make any headway? Or are they gonna be protecting? Every time we do this, we end up in court. The fear is that things are gonna turn from red to purple. And I get the impression they're a little scared here.
Let me start, and Royce can hit the home run out of the box. Sonny, our redistricting is going to your audience is going to have a lot of weight in our redistricting. We need to stress, and the information is on my state website. We need our people of African Americans to be a part of these hearings, and they need to voice their opinion. Royce and I are just two people that can, but our masses, if our masses put their comments in and attend these and ask questions to these virtual committee hearings, it would help us out a lot. The answer to your question, no, we're not going to sit by and let nothing happen and let something happen. Matter of fact, Royce will tell you, he and I have already contracted a lawyer and signed in with a lawyer to represent us. Okay, and it's not going to be cheap. I'll let you go from there, Royce.
Well, I mean, here's the deal. And Boris has already told people in Houston that he has the hearing dates up on his site, as well as how to register. There is no excuse for not participating other than being lazy, okay? And if you hadn't participated, don't come up to me and start talking about redistricting. We've put it out in terms of how you can register and participate in these regional hearings. In North Central Texas, as an example, on February the 4th, we're having our redistricting hearing. Now, that's the first one. And there'll be others once the maps are drawn. But now is the time to start registering and participating. And you'll be able to justify it up to 3 minutes. And that's all you need to do. Don't have to worry about coming down to Austin. Just Zoom in and testify.
And people need to know what that Zoom in number is. How do people get to those Zoom meetings to observe them? Can you all tell our audience that?
Well, I know if you go to my website, just go. Mm-hmm. In fact, if you go to my Facebook, Royce West, Senator Royce West, it's on there. Okay. If you go to my Senate website, it's on there.
Likewise,
we'll make certain we send it to you.
There are no excuses. You can go to their websites, or you can go to their social media platforms. There are ways for you to connect virtually to find out what is happening as far as Black Texans are concerned, or what our government on the state level is passing as far as policies are concerned. Our final question is from the Houston Public Media statewide reporter, Sasha Cordner, and we're going to hit this real quick.
People of color are underrepresented in STEM careers and STEM fields of study. What is the state doing to enrich education activities to inspire future STEM leaders?
African Americans have been able to compete in the digital age, or should I say have not been able to compete. And yet it is increasing as far as the interest and the number of jobs that are available in that area. Is the state doing anything to open the doors of opportunities for STEM education?
Yeah, I mean, yes, to answer the question. There are a lot of STEM opportunities at these various universities. In addition, every year for the past 20-something years, I've always had an internship program. We've placed over 3,000 students during my term as a state senator. And several of those, a significant number of those, was in fact in the STEM area, more specifically technology, computer technology, and the use of that technology departments in various companies. And as a result of that, some of the experiences, we've had students go on and be hired by those companies. And so, yes, there are STEM opportunities. I recommend that you check with Texas Southern, Purview, Paul Quinn, other state universities for those opportunities, not only for the education, but also for the externship opportunities.
Well, Boris?
And let me agree with everything Royce has said about STEM. But, we need to work with our rural areas, because it's not just our urban areas that there's a big digital divide. Right. We need to get an alliance with our rural areas in the state of Texas, because most of them are represented by Republicans, okay? But we have the same problem. They have the same problem we do on a lot of these issues. A lot of these social economic issues, such as STEM, we're suffering at the same rate. So, Royce, I believe we need to get an alliance with those rural areas, right, and help them to help us push the governor and the Texas leadership to putting more money into STEM and investing more money into our kids through STEM. And statistics show STEM students that are mentored with STEM do a whole lot better job. They do a whole lot better job than those who are not mentored with STEM.
And so mentoring should be maybe a program we could look at in the community to really develop those careers. Senator Miles and Senator West, I want to thank you for joining us tonight for the state of Black Texas and empowering us with information that impacts our day-to-day lives. We appreciate you. Any closing remarks? Now is the time.
Boris, you want to go?
I'm gonna steal your thunder. Voting has consequences. Voting has consequences, okay? I need people to understand that. And we didn't get a chance to talk about the Confederacy.
Yeah, you could hit that right quick. What do you think about that?
Well, Royce and I have been fighting the fight for the last 3 years now, and we've got a one-on-one meeting with the Lieutenant Governor that we're looking forward to on the 9th of next month. Just he, I, and Royce. And look, let me tell you,
that was one of the Panhellenic Council of Houston's question. What's the status on getting rid of these Confederate statues?
Hey, believe when I say Royce and I are working on it. It's an issue that the state of Texas has to look into very deeply, because there's no such thing as a Confederate hero in my book, and I'm sure the books that y'all read. 1, because they lost. 2, because they were fighting to keep us enslaved. And 3, if you read the Confederacy, the Article 4, Section 9, the Confederate Constitution of the Confederacy purpose was to keep Black folks enslaved. If we are all Texans, then why do we need to continue to celebrate and serve this if we're looking for equality across the country? Because let me tell you something. Somebody once said, the country needs to control its ignorance. If they don't, its ignorance is going to control the country.
Amen.
And that's where we are now.
Royce, what's your closing remark?
My closing remarks is that we're making this more complex than it actually is. If we want to deal with the issues of the Confederacy, vote.
He changed it up on me, Sonny.
He changed it.
He found another way to get it in.
He did, but he got it in.
That's my big brother. Right? That's my big brother.
So we want to thank those in the community who have joined us tonight, and we invite you to support us by either making a donation, but definitely completing the survey that was on the landing page where you came to log into the program. An extra special shout out and thanks to our sponsors, HEB, Chevron, Cadence Bank, Amegy Bank, and the Houston Public Media. We want to thank our community partners who had a terrific set of questions. And most of all, we also want you to join us in applauding our production team, who has done an outstanding job with the state of Black Texas. With that, good night, and we'll roll credits.